Good evening and welcome to the January 8th, 2014 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have 9 public hearings scheduled for this evening, the first of which is an annexation petition for approximately 18.52 acres along South Church Street, Richard and Carol Mosley, and other applicants. Mrs. Green.
Thank you, sir. Our first public hearing this evening is to consider the annexing of 4 parcels located along the western side of Shelbyville Highway or South Church Street, also known as Highway 96. The properties are shaded in the color orange on the map that's before you on your iPads, and I think also coming up on the screen. You can see on this map that Highway 96 is the frontage of these properties, and just across the Highway 90, or just across 231, I said 96, but 231. But just across 231 is the proposed Walmart site, and it's actually under construction, and that's why there's a label on those properties. To the north are 2 parcels which are currently in the city limits, and you know which parcels are in the city because they are shaded in the yellow color. If it's in the white color, it's in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County. These 4 parcels are what is being requested for annexation. There is a single-family house located on each of the parcels and a cemetery located close to the right-of-way, and you can see that by the small rectangle shape within the orange area. The owners desire to sell their property and desire to have the city provide services to it. Initially, just 1 parcel was included in this annexation study. The staff suggested that the owners that also were looking to sell their property for a type of commercial use join this application, and that's why this application has expanded tonight to include these 4 parcels. The total property is 18.52 acres and it does not need to include any right-of-way along 231 because that's already been annexed into the city when the properties across the street were annexed. I believe there are representatives of the applicant here in the audience. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you. But before you make your recommendation regarding the annexation of these parcels, you should conduct a public hearing. I have provided you with a plan of services which outlines what services will be available and a time frame for when the city will provide them. You may make note that at this time, the city will be able to provide fire protection and other services such as planning and codes, and the properties will be able to participate in these school systems. However, the city's sanitary sewer is not available to this property, to any of these properties. And available means, in the Water and Sewer Department's language, that it's not within 250 feet of the property. It's actually the closest location is located across the highway at the Walmart site. So if development happens in the future, they will need to do a study on how sewer can be served to these parcels, or consider an alternative means of sanitary sewer waste management. So those details are outlined for you in your plan of services. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing.
Okay, does the developer have a representative? Come right up.
Good evening. Sheree Akers with Huddleston Steel. First, the client and the representative for the developer, Chris Bratchert, is ill this evening and has the flu, so he wanted me to express he's sorry he couldn't be here, and hopefully I can answer any of your questions. We originally we're going to come before you at the November meeting with just 1 parcel and ask for annexation and rezoning, and staff recommended to us to meet with some of the other property owners and have a coordinated effort and ask some of them to come in on the application as well. So we took a deferment, and we have done that and met with the property owners, and 3 additional property owners have joined in the application to have it be comprised of 18 acres. And the goal here was to have a coordinated effort on the annexation and rezoning in order to limit some of the access onto 231, and so there aren't multiple access points onto 231. So we've done that, and I'm happy to answer any questions for you about the site. Basically, the area is changing with the addition of the Walmart, and most of the properties would not be marketable as residential in the future, and that's the reason for the request. Thank you.
Any questions from Ms. Akers? Thank you, Ms. Akers. I appreciate it. If you've never been to one of our public hearings before, I'll briefly go over our regulations that we go by. We'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak either for or against the proposal. Please come to the microphone and clearly state your name and give your address if you would. make all your comments and questions to the Planning Commission. If you do have questions, the staff will make note of your questions. We'll try to address those at the conclusion of the public hearing. All that being said, I'll ask, we will be observing the 3-minute time limit, so we have several people that probably like to speak tonight on several items, so please keep your comments brief, no longer than 3 minutes if you would. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing for this first proposal and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Hi, I'm Vicki Williams. I live at 223 Linford Drive. I oppose the rezoning of these 4 properties from residential to commercial. I feel it will affect our whole neighborhood. It will cause more noise, more light, more traffic, and the potential for more crime.
Okay, Ms. Williams, let me just remind you, this first public hearing is for the annexation. The next one will be for the zoning.
Okay, should I save this for the...
Either way, you're up there. Feel free to
Okay.
go ahead and speak now if you'd like.
Okay, I oppose both of them.
That's fine.
I think it will affect my property directly. A drainage ditch divides my property. My question is, will I have more runoff water and debris from new development? Water gets out of the banks of the drainage ditch after a quick or heavy rain. I have a footbridge across the span of the drainage ditch to get to my vegetable garden. It has been washed out because of flooding and has been replaced since then. I have lots of debris left behind by the flooding. Last big rain, December of 2013, I picked up 10 heaping wheelbarrow loads of garbage, limbs, leaves, and grass clippings. I have limbs so large I cannot manage to clean them up myself. I get skids with nails in them. Below my home, homes have been surrounded by floodwater, filling their crawl space and submerging their heat and air units. Water floods the road, where 2 culverts run under the road on Linford Drive. I have contacted the county about the flooding and debris left behind. I get no help. It is up to me, the homeowner, to clean and maintain the drainage ditch on my property, which is a county easement. Please consider how this new development will impact the Linford Oaks neighborhood. I'll also have some pictures on my digital camera of debris left behind in my drainage ditch if y'all are interested in seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, would anybody else like to speak? Last call. Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Adelot, this is pertaining to the annexation, so as far as her question about drainage, we'll maybe wait and address that on the next one.
Let me just kind of answer both of them right now. She's got it on her mind, and I think it's very pertinent. The annexation itself is not going to change any of the drainage, but what it will do is change the jurisdiction of who's looking over the part of the drainage. The part that will become in the city will become our jurisdiction, and that's the city's responsibility to manage. Our stormwater program will require that there be no net impact as a result of development on that property, so that when development occurs, we're going to be reviewing site plans, the development plans, to endeavor to keep there from being an impact on the downstream property owners. Now, about the debris, if debris is washing off a site that's in the city, we won't know about it. We'll turn it into our codes department, and if it can be a codes issue, we have more stringent codes than the county does. We'll get our codes department to enforce our ordinances. And if it's washing off site, that sounds to be the kind of problems that we can help you with. So, Ms. Williams, if you would send your photographs to my office, I'm going to put one of my business cards up here. I would like for you to email them to me. I'll see to it that the city engineer and the street department get them.
Okay, any members of the Planning Commission have any questions of the applicant? If there's no questions, we're ready for a motion.
I move we recommend approval.
Motion is made for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Move on to the second public hearing, which is a zoning application for the same parcels, approximately 18.52 acres along South Church Street, to be zoned as commercial highway simultaneous annexation. Parmendra Patel and others are the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir. Second public hearing is a companion to the previous public hearing because it's considering the 4 parcels which you just recommended annexing in the previous agenda item. These 4 parcels are located along Shelbyville Highway or South Church Street, Highway 231. They each have a single-family house located on them, and there's a small cemetery located near the highway. The property to the north is in Murfreesboro city limits and is currently zoned CH, that's Commercial Highway District, and we have reviewed and approved a site plan for the development of those 2 parcels to combine them into one parcel and develop them with a small retail center. Across the street, you can see there's property that's zoned PCD, that's Planned Commercial District, and that's the location of a Walmart, which is currently under construction. They have received some permits and are currently moving forward and developing the site. You can also see across the highway that the property south of the Walmart site is zoned CH, which is Highway Commercial District. You also see an area zoned RS15, and that is just the right-of-way of Shelbyville Highway. We don't zone rights-of-way, and so that's just a holdover from when it was annexed. So it really doesn't have much bearing on development because it's a street, and it's just kind of extending the city limits so you can see it. But the areas contiguous with these properties to the south, to the west, and to the northwest are shaded white, and those properties are in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County. The majority of those properties are zoned for residential or agricultural purposes in the county. These 4 parcels, which have requested annexation, would be zoned for single-family residential purposes unless they make an application to change the zone. So the property owners have petitioned you to consider changing the zone of these 4 parcels upon their annexation becoming effective. They're requesting that you recommend these properties are zoned CH simultaneous with their annexation. CH, of course, stands for Commercial Highway District and is a commercial zone that we typically see along our major arterials, and Shelbyville Highway is a major arterial. I think that what's in this area is changing, especially with the construction of the Walmart site, and that is essentially a catalyst for some change in the area. And because of that, the property owners are interested in marketing their properties for commercial value, or for commercial property, and they don't see as much value in selling them as residential. So the request to you is to change the zoning to CH, and you should hold a public hearing before making your recommendation to City Council. And, of course, this public hearing is regarding the zoning change for the properties.
Okay. Ms. Akers, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just to clarify on the stormwater quality and drainage, we will, obviously, as Mr. Adelot said, we will meet those requirements at site plan approval. It's our intent. In addition, due to the fact that we're going to have to provide a septic system, the majority of the development will occur along the highway and not in the rear, so we'll be able to provide a lot of open space on each parcel. And the extent of that open space will be determined at site plan, but it will be pretty extensive in order to provide drain fields and to be able to drain the property adequately. If you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Any questions to Ms. Akers? If there's no questions, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Anybody at all? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions? Excuse me. My voice is about gone today.
Ms. Green,
Yes, sir.
is it reasonable to expect that the city will have jurisdiction on this property as far as drainage is concerned, and we'll be able to help Ms. Williams? Where'd she go? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, that will actually help her property?
Well, we certainly will review plans for when these properties are ready to develop, any plans, and we consider all impervious surface that's going to be added. And we require these properties to manage the quantity of water that this site receives. They cannot put more water onto their neighbors than maybe currently goes there, and we require them to treat the quality of water. So that's a little different than I think maybe Rutherford County does at this time. So we have two elements to our plans when we review drainage plans. We want them to manage quantity and quality, and we'll require that. I don't know her specifics. I don't know where the water's coming from her property, if it actually is coming from this or not, but we'll certainly study it, and we'll require the engineer who prepares the plans to study it and stamp those plans and demonstrating that they're accurate. But we have topographic maps where when we get together and review these, we're going to make sure that it won't add to any kind of negative impact. I'm hesitant to say anything specific about our property because I haven't studied it, and I'd like to study it.
The next question I had was, commercial highway backing up to residential. That's the biggest zone change that we have, really. Refresh me in how that works a little bit, please.
Well, we do have some more intense zones, industrial
Buffering.
zones, but commercial highway allows the most types of commercial uses of our commercial districts that we have outlined in our zoning ordinance. So what we require when there's a situation where the CH zone is adjacent to property zoned for residential purposes is that they install a buffer that's a minimum of 15 feet wide and planted with evergreen plants and screened and possibly with a fence. We'll study it and see if the fence would be beneficial on the site. But we always require a landscape buffer, a minimum of a 15-foot wide landscape buffer, and the landscaping will be planted in rows and alternated so that it has a screening effect, not just a enhancing effect.
We have lots of commercial highway backing up to residential in the city today. So this is not unusual to have commercial highway backing up to residential, and it works in a lot of different areas around town. So
It's certainly not unusual on South Church Street to have CH along South Church Street, and then the residential zones near that.
thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Young?
Not right now.
Any other questions?
Ms. Green, could you kind of define the types of differences in the land use?
Sure, we have type A, B, C, D, and E buffers, so 5 different types of buffers, A being the one that requires the least width and the least amount of plantings, and E requiring the most. Type E buffer is what we have required between properties that are zoned for residential purposes, adjacent to properties that are used for industrial and residential. Type D is the second most intense zone that we have, and so that's what we see when we have the heavier commercial districts adjacent to the residential zones, and then it just gets lesser. So, but that type D is the 15 feet with the heavy evergreen buffer. So you can't just plant like red buds or dogwood trees to make it look nice. Usually you will have to see trees there that are chosen because they are going to have a screening effect all 12 months of the year.
Any other questions?
One more question.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Green, would it be reasonable to expect that since they're having to put a septic system in, that there will be a greater distance or more space between the residential and the actual development of the commercial in this?
I know that the planning director often says distance is the best buffer, so if there's a way where we can review these plans and have a greater distance, we're certainly going to improve those. I think that where this septic goes depends a lot on maybe the soils and how the lots lay out. I certainly know that it would be the preference of any future developers and the preference of the city that the intense use stays closer to the highway, and the rear of the property would be where you'd see maybe the fields or something. But I believe that it also depends on the soils, and I'm not as familiar with reviewing septic tanks since I know what we will require is CUD to investigate this with us and look at it and help come up with a plan that's going to work.
And that would protect the existing neighbors more than in a lot of other commercial.
That's right. It'll add a buffer distance, which is in excess of what our zoning ordinance requires.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm done.
You're done. Any other questions? Okay, if there's no other questions, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve this zoning.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item C is a PRD amendment and rezoning application for approximately 1.14 acres along Old Las Casas Highway to be removed from the Stratford Hall PRD and to be zoned as a separate PRD. Mr. Gary Wisniewski is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir. The next public hearing is to consider rezoning property that's currently a part of the Stratford Hall plan development. You can see that the property is located in the far southwestern corner of the property, and it's shaded orange on the map before you. This is 1.14 acres, and it has frontage on Old Las Casas Highway. And Gary Wisniewski is the applicant who is requesting that this 1.14 acres be removed from the current plan development package and is interested in creating a brand-new plan development package, which I think you have a copy of on your desks. It's called 35 degrees, 86 degrees, and it'll be a little bit larger than this. Also, there's a PDF of that included in your materials. This property, of course, has frontage on Old Las Casas Highway. The applicant desires to amend the Stratford Hall PRD by removing this from the plan development and have it be its own independent PRD. So when development occurs on this property, currently we would go to the program that was established for Stratford Hall. If this is approved by both Houston City Council, this zoning, the program book which you have before you would become the zoning for the property. The proposed development would consist of 17 townhome dwelling units as described in that program book. The property to the north along Old Las Casas Highway includes 4 parcels, and you can see they're zoned RS-15 on the map. Some of these parcels appear to be used as a rental property. The property across Old Las Casas Highway is zoned RM-12, and it's a little obscured from the label. That RM-12 stands for Residential Multifamily District, and it allows a density of 12 dwelling units per acre, and it's developed with a row of duplex structures on individual lots. And behind them is a high-density multifamily development that's oriented towards student housing for MTSU. To the south along Old Las Casas Highway is an area zoned RS-15, and you can see that to the contiguous south. That includes one single-family dwelling that is the remnant of the farm, which was originally the Stratford Hall development was a part of, but of course it was sold and developed. And to the east of that is the remainder of the Stratford Hall PRD that is currently under development. The proposed density is comparable to the RM-16 district, and that's multifamily residential district, which would permit 16 dwelling units per acre. However, as a part of the PRD program, the applicant's requesting to be able to have a 20-foot building setback rather than the 30-foot setback otherwise required in our zoning ordinance. I believe Ms. Cherie Akers is representing the applicant, and she'd like to come up to go over some of the details of the plan. After she presents this, you should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to City Council.
Good evening again. How are you? I did give you a full presentation at the workshop, the last workshop, so I'm going to be a little bit brief, but kind of walk you through the plan again.
Pull the microphone a little closer.
I'm also sick, so hopefully my voice will hold out. As Ms. Green indicated, this is an amendment to the existing Stratford Hall PRD. We're proposing to separate this 1.14 acre site from the PRD and develop it as a 17-unit townhome project that will serve the MSTU community. It is within walking distance, so we think it would be a great site for a student village. There is direct access from Old Las Casas Highway, and the residents will be entering from the highway. There are a number of other multifamily complexes in the vicinity, so we feel it's in the character of the area and would be consistent. The site is currently vacant. There is a construction entrance right now that runs along where you see the parking lot. I know there are some concerns from the existing Stratford Hall HOA that we maintain that. Landmark Homes is committed to maintaining it, and they will continue to do so throughout the end of the development for Stratford Hall. I believe there are 34 remaining homes in that site, and he's also developing those, so we will maintain that construction interest. Water and sewer are available to the site from Old Las Casas Highway. There is a bioretention area that is located on the existing Stratford Hall. This is how we will drain our property. Another concern is how that will be maintained and who will be responsible. The applicant is going to work with the HOA, and we have calculated our impact on that bioretention area for our development to be approximately 11% of the overall acreage required. So they will commit to a 12% of their HOA fee will go towards the cost of maintaining. So they will pay for their impact completely. And those details will have to be worked out in a formal agreement drafted. Again, the project is proposed as sort of a student village. It's an urbanistic type development, and it's designed to feel like the student residential village. The residents will all be connected by a walkway and a common outdoor living space that will provide opportunities for the residents to participate in any recreational and social activities. Development, again, is in close proximity to the university, so it will be convenient for walking distance for the students. It's their intent to create this urban neighborhood. Landscape buffers that are proposed will be located on the north, south, and east property lines, and there'll be a Type C buffer, 15-foot buffer, to screen it from the adjacent single-family homes. The typical floor is about 1,200 square feet. They are 2-bedroom minimum, and they are 2 stories. Another concern of the HOA that I believe was expressed to staff is that the second floor may view into other homes in Stratford Hall. Unfortunately, they are a townhome. There is an up and a downstairs, and there are bedrooms. We are required for safety and fire to have windows. We will commit to using some type of obscure glass to help shield that. Plus, there will be buffers. And it should be noted that there's also 2-story homes proposed within Stratford Hall, so the same issue could be seen into ours. Again, the architectural is an urban architectural style. The buildings basically consist of brick to about 2 feet high, 24 inches, and then the remaining will be a masonry-based siding and a batten pattern. There'll be focal areas used with metal siding and accent details to provide individuality to each of the buildings. There will also be uniform unit addresses and oversized numbers for safety reasons and to further do the identification. Again, there will be a common area, a focal point that is in the center. It will provide a pavilion and lawn area, a community cooking area, and some Wi-Fi technology stations. That concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Ms. Akers, let me ask you something. I believe, from reading the letter I have on my desk here from Ms. Hunter, I think she's talking about the 2 units that are in the perpendicular buildings that are on the east side of the development. So you have the wall that would face, there's only one wall there that would face the east toward Stratford Hall, since the rest of those units are completely contained units on both sides. Would it be necessary to put windows on the eastern side of those 2 units, since you don't have them on any of the other units? I think that's her question.
I'm going to defer to Gary, if that's possible.
Okay, sure.
Chairman Lamb and Planning Commission, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. On the second story of each one of the units, they are bedrooms both front and back. Any of the windows that would actually face into Stratford Hall, we could go ahead and obscure those windows. The windows have to remain for fire egress and for codes. But as far as obscuring the view, anything that they would deem that would be inappropriate on a second story, we could go ahead and obscure.
I think what she's talking about is not the windows on the front and the rear of the units. It's the windows that would be on the side of only those 2 units that would be facing Stratford Hall.
On the first story or the second story?
Second story.
On the second story, the same thing. Those are bedroom. Well, the way the
You
units
wouldn't
are
be required there because you've already got them on the front and back.
exactly. So the units that face Old Casas, when we went through plan review, it was suggested that we put some windows on those just to break up the streetscape. Those we could put the windows on. The units that actually face back towards Stratford Hall, there's no need for those windows. If you'd like us to pull those out, as long as we have egress front and back on the bedrooms.
Okay, well, we'll conduct a public hearing. We'll see the comments about that. That's what I wanted to clear up.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Akers. Thank you very much. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak at this time.
I'm Kay Armstrong, 1302 Scarlet Drive. I am the property nearest to this new development in Stratford Hall. I do not at all look forward to having college students back there. We have enough trouble with the ones that live on Old Las Casas now, with noise, all hours of the night. I just don't look forward to that at all. Besides that, it doesn't look as though it's compatible with the rest of our subdivision. It just doesn't fit. I don't look forward to this at all. I think it's a terrible plan. Most of us did not buy our homes with anticipation of having apartments there that are rental. We have no rental units in our subdivision, even though we do have townhomes. They are all owner-occupied, and I would like to see us keep it that way. Also, what is the kind of obscuring, what does that mean, obscuring the windows or the view? That was mentioned several times. What does that actually mean?
We'll have to ask later.
I beg your
We'll
pardon?
make a note and try to ask later, okay?
I didn't know.
Answer that.
We will ask the developer after the
okay,
public hearing, okay?
I sure would like to see this not happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong.
Good evening. I'm Claudia Hunter. I live at 1935 Scarlet Drive. I am the president of the Homeowners Association of Stratford Hall. I think you have a document that was shared with you from Joseph Adelot regarding our concerns as the Homeowners Association of Stratford Hall. Mr. Wisniewski has addressed several of those tonight because I did share our concerns with him. We would prefer that those two buildings that are perpendicular to our property not have windows on the facing Stratford Hall, as it will look over into our property. And he addressed the construction entrance. Our only construction entrance is on that property, that little acre, and I think it's 1.14 acres of property that they are wanting to develop. We have private streets. We are responsible for paving them, and we're concerned about the heavy equipment that will have to be coming through our neighborhood. But he kind of addressed that already in the respect that he said he would leave that construction entrance open, and I would hope that you would approve that based on the fact that he would keep that open. We're concerned about the storm drainage. Mr. Wisniewski also addressed that. With all of the impervious materials that are going to be on this property, we are very concerned about how much water is going to come into our bioretention area. I don't know that it has been engineered for the additional water that will produce. It's, as I understand it, it's not complete at this point, so I guess it could be re-engineered, but at this point it's not engineered for that. Our concern is that Mr. Wisniewski's documents on page 7 state that we would have an agreement made with the HOA of Centerpoint, the HOA of Stratford Hall, and the HOA of Centerpoint would come to an agreement as to how much money they would pay for maintenance. Well, there isn't an HOA of Centerpoint at this point, and by the time there is, it'll all be there. And so what do we do? Put a dam up? I mean, I'm being facetious, but seriously, coming to an agreement with somebody who isn't in existence is it's a difficult thing. So that's really what I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hunter.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name is Carla Crater. I live at 1906 Scarlet Drive. My home is second closest to the proposed development. I have a two-story home, and I can tell you that when I use the second story of my home, I get an incredible amount of noise from the property that is actually on Old Las Casas right next to what will be this development. So it disappoints me to learn that we are planning to attract renters, especially youthful renters, to add to that noise. I also am not, it's not appropriate for me to speak on behalf of the HOA, but as a homeowner whose dues go to taking care of the common areas, I do have a concern that the water runoff area would be, I believe it was said that it was near 12% of land area, and based on the fact that this would be primarily paved parking lot, it seems to me that the water runoff would be greater than the percentage of land area that the property covers. I don't know if I've made myself clear, but my concern is that it's not an equal percentage, since most of the water that hits this property would run off. And that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Jerry Allen, 1434 Charleston Boulevard in Stratford Hall. I'm also on the HOA. I'm treasurer of the HOA. Our biggest concern with this property, we're not against this property. I'm not personally against this property. I think it may be the best use for the 1.14 acres that's there. If we could get the storm drainage and the construction entrance and the privacy issues settled, I think we'd be have no problems with it, since we can't control it anyway, and it will be an independent. It'll be independent of Stratford Hall, and we're all for that. As far as the drainage is concerned, we think there should be another solution to the stormwater dispersal, and rather than involving taking all the stormwater off this 1.14 acres and putting it on to another independent PRD. And so they're taking all their stormwater and putting it somewhere else. If we develop something on Stratford Hall, I doubt that if we would be able to take our stormwater off and put it on the Cunningham property. And one that comes to mind is Publix several years ago came on Memorial Boulevard and wanted to, across from State Farm, and wanted to build a building, and it would move a great deal of stormwater and put it into the Palmer Heights area. And if I'm not mistaken, that plan failed because of that reason. We personally would like for the Centerpoint to take care of their own water on site, or do something else with it rather than put it on a neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Anybody else? Nobody? In that case, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Adelaide, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, sir. I did receive the communication from the HOA, Ms. Hunter, and Mr. Allen did visit with me. We had a very good visit. I asked them to send me an email. I shared it with you. I did share it with Mr. Wisniewski and his team. I think that they've made some effort to address the concerns. The construction entrance is one of the big concerns that I have, because I think that that's a very valid consideration, considering that the construction entrance would be closed by this development. And until it's no longer needed in Stratford Hall or for a couple of more sections of the subdivision, it would be awkward to be expecting the construction trucks to come in the front gate. It is a private street community, and that would be something I think I have some concerns about. With regards to the privacy, I think there must have been a miscommunication between Mr. Wisniewski, because it's very clear that the two buildings that are perpendicular, the codes aren't going to require those to have the windows. And I think he understands that, and I think he understands that now, as he was alluding to, that he could fix those two buildings, because there's only 2 units, and it would be the upstairs of those. I think he can fix those. With regards to the storm drainage, I'm not sure it's an easy fix. I think that the natural conditions may require that there be some drainage through the Stratford Hall system. That's the way the property has been set up from the conception of Stratford Hall for this property to come through there. I think what's more important is not stopping the drainage, it's figuring out what the proper management program is. I would like to suggest to the Planning Commission that because this is a planned residential development application, and because the program book has to be clear when we get to council, I think it'd be appropriate to defer action for 1 month or at least 2 weeks to get this, the program book updated and to get these issues clarified and in writing from Mr. Wisniewski. We've had some correspondence or at least some discussion during the week, but I'd like to have something tangible that we're in agreement on. Also, because the HOA has a little bit of a life at this point in Stratford Hall, I think there needs to be some buy-in that we are communicating effectively with them.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr.
Yeah.
I'd like you to say a buy-in. Have they not had a meeting with the HOA and all the groups? I mean,
To my knowledge,
surely it hadn't come this far without that happening.
to my knowledge, there has not been a meeting with the Stratford Hall Homeowners Association for the only purpose of discussing this application. I think there have been other meetings where this was a tag-along issue, but I don't think that there was ever a meeting where this was the primary issue for discussion with the HOA. Am I correct, Mr. Wisniewski?
That's correct, Mr.
It's a surprise.
Yeah, I would like to see. I'd like to see more dialogue, and I'd like to see something worked out before we did a final vote on it and with our recommendation to council about it. Like Ms. Hunter was saying, just saying, well, go ahead and prove it now, we'll get it all worked out later. That's really not the way we do it. So.
Well, I'm 100% in agreement with what you just said, Mr. Lamb.
I have a question, Mr. Lamb.
Mr. Young.
Okay, I'm missing something here. When he finishes his project, will it close the construction entrance? Thus, the other undeveloped properties in Stratford Hall, how are the heavy trucks going to get in there?
There's two approaches. One, he simply does not build that last building in the townhome in this development until the need for the construction entrance is substantially gone. Bear in mind, there will always be some kind of construction going on in Stratford Hall. That's just inherent in any subdivision. People will be re-roofing, people will be building an addition, people will be doing something. So there will always be a time when there will be construction vehicles entering. But there will be a time when the construction of the new streets will be concluded. The gravel trucks no longer need to be coming in to the degree that they would when the subdivision is under construction. The concrete trucks for the heavy framing and the heavy foundations that go on a lot of these buildings are on slab. Well, I think they are. And if they are, that requires a lot of concrete, so there'll be a time when that won't be as frequent. And I think that there would be an acceptance that they would no longer need to be a separate construction entrance. So I think that back to what I was starting to say, I think that it could happen as there could be a temporary entrance through the parking lot in this development. It could align very comfortably and work very well. We may have to work with Mr. Wisniewski so that we allow him to put his final topping of the parking lot in. It's a relatively short distance across this 1.1 acres from Old Las Casas to the alley that's to be constructed as part of Stratford Hall, where the construction entrance comes in. So it may be that we have to work with him, but I think I'd like to know what the plan is so that when we approve it, we know what our expectations are, he knows what his obligations are, and the Stratford Hall people know what to expect as well.
For that final undeveloped field back there directly east of the Center Point proposed properties is now undergoing development. They're building in there now, but it's still, I'd say, several years before it's going to be finished out. So it needs to be agreed how long that construction entrance is going to stay open and at what point can it be closed, and whether that's a total completion of all new construction back there or a certain percentage of all the houses are completed and occupied or whatever. But that needs to go right along with the drainage agreement.
And I think it can be structured. It's just I think it's just going to require a little bit more effort to make sure that we've got clear communication so we all know what the game plan is when we go to council.
Well, I know Stratford Hall clearly does not want construction vehicles entering through the front gate because they've got a big sign out there that says $500 fine. So they've made that quite clear. So I think a deferment is in order as well. Anybody? Okay. The motion is made. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item D is a zoning application for approximately 10.52 acres along Brinkley Road to be rezoned from PRD to commercial fringe. Mr. Sam Coleman is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir. Our next public hearing is to consider changing the zone of property that's located along Brinkley Road from its current PRD zone, Planned Residential District, to CF, and that's Commercial Fringe District. This property was zoned to PRD in 2006 to permit the development of a 96-unit multifamily campus. Although the zoning approved, the project never moved forward to permitting or submitting any development plans for the site. Therefore, it remains in its undeveloped state. The applicant now desires to purchase the property and develop it in a manner allowed in the CF zone. Accordingly, they've made an application to change the zone to CF. The properties to the north are zoned RS-15 in that single-family residential district, and were zoned RS-15 when they were annexed into the city limits. RS-15, of course, is the default zone or interim zone that properties are zoned when they are annexed without a companion zoning change request. The properties to the west are zoned RS-12 in that single-family residential district with the minimum lot size of 12,000 square feet, and are currently developing single-family subdivisions. The properties to the south are zoned RS-15, that single-family residential district, and these properties were developed in the county, later annexed into the city. And because there was no companion zoning change request for these properties, they are zoned RS-15, single-family residential district. Across Brinkley Road are properties zoned CF, and that's Commercial Fringe District. The area that's located closest to Manson Pike, at the intersection of Manson Pike and Brinkley Road, is developed, but a majority of that CF property is still currently undeveloped. You can also see that some of the properties are RS-12 and RS-10, which are various forms of residential single-family zones. And then on the corner of Manson Pike and Brinkley Road is a gas station that was zoned PCD, Planned Commercial District, and developed, and I think they call it a market. It also has two suites where there used to be a pizza store, I don't know if there's one there, and a liquor store. So that was rezoned to CF, Commercial Fringe District. And then behind that property is property zone CL, Commercial Local District, which is what properties zoned for commercial purposes in the county when they're annexed and there's no companion zoning change request, they get an interim or default zoning of CL. So this property is 10.52 acres, and the applicant, Mr. Sam Coleman, would like to develop it, but not according to the program book. You have several program books laid out before you tonight for other zoning change requests, and as you know, that becomes the zoning for the property, and the development plan needs to comply with that program book to the letter, and if it doesn't, then they'll need to either amend the zoning or change the zoning. In this case, it's my understanding that the applicant's not interested in moving forward with developing multifamily campus as the zoning currently permits, and is requesting the CF zone because he believes that that is a commercial zone that would permit the development, but isn't our most intense commercial zone. I mentioned CH earlier this evening, and that's our commercial district that allows the most types of commercial uses. And then we have the Commercial Fringe District, which is being requested here, which was developed to be for those properties located within an area where there's residential zone, and you can see that there are several houses around this area. The CF doesn't allow all the uses permitted in the CH district, and it also requires some distance separation from some obnoxious elements that may go along with a business that may be just fine. So a restaurant, but the speaker box has to be located so that it's not a nuisance to the neighbors, or a gas station, but you can't have the lights or the pumps being close to the neighbors. So during the previous reviews, it was discovered that, of course, there are some drainage and traffic considerations that must be considered with this property. Brinkley Road is a substandard road. Any future development of this, whether it's with the apartments or with the changed plan, will require some improvements be made to Brinkley Road because it is a substandard street. That's something that we do as ordinarily we do with our routine business when we review site plans. When we see development of properties along these substandard streets, we require them to participate in the improvements. And so I certainly believe that they'll have to dedicate right-of-way and either construct some improvements or give the city some money to construct those improvements. So this request is being made to change the property from PRD to CF. You should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to City Council. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing.
Okay. Does anybody want to represent the applicant? Ms. Akers, once again. Busy night.
I think I get a little break after this, but I represent the new owner and new developer, Mr. Sam Coleman, and Margaret Ann has done a great presentation of the facts. What I would like to add is, we're basically proposing to develop the site with a self-storage facility in the front of the property, which is a low-traffic generator. It's also a special use permit, so we will have to come before the BZA and also site plan review, where we will address the drainage and the traffic. And the client is very much aware of the issues and that he may have to contribute to some road improvements. If you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from Ms. Akers? Thank you. Okay, that being said, we'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
My name is John Kennard. I live at 4964 Clover Hill. Although I'm not directly adjoined to this property, I will be affected by this property because of the growth that it will be. I'm concerned that I remember when we had the hearing for changing this to the present PRD, that there were several people that were here that were kind of opposed to it. Of course, it went through, changed, nothing happened. To change it to CF, I'm seeing something I thought that the City Council was against, which is jumping from one type of zoning to another, back to another. The CF is between RS-15 and RS-15. True, CF is across the street. But if y'all have driven on Brinkley Road where this is, the city needs to do something with that street before any commercial development occurs right there. There are no shoulders. There's about a 3-foot drop off on either side. The road is very narrow, and it bends there. But before we change it to CF, I'd like to see exactly what the CF is going to do. Once it becomes CF, it's too late. Whatever goes in the CF, the city can do. But right now, I don't see that CF, until we have further understanding, what's going to happen all the way back through there. There's already a drainage problem back there when the Princeton went in. And of course, that's what caused annexation for Clover Hill and the other 100 and something homes that were involved to be annexed into the city because we could not be surrounded. So I'd like to see something more, and I hope the council will ask for more specific plans. Why do we need CF in that area? I know CF brings in higher prices for property than RS-15, but I don't like to see the domino effect, hop, skip, and jump, because then it just, first thing you know, you have to change everything else because you're surrounded by CF. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kennard. Anybody else? Nobody? I'll close the public hearing. Any questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Mr. Adelot, what kind of time frame would, I mean, if there was commercial development down this road, I actually was on this road this afternoon about 4 o'clock, and it scares me to death every time I go down that road because of that drop-off and the absolutely zero shoulder, no room at all for the slightest little mistake. But even though the proposed development would contribute to the potential road improvements, how long down the line would that be before you'd have road improvements?
Okay, let me talk a little bit broad and let me talk a little bit specific. First of all, this is a street that is on our capital improvement plan for improvement. We see the need. I believe it's come for, and I may have this confused, but it's either a 3 or a 5 lane roadway that we're looking at. So we're looking at a dramatic improvement in construction. We've got the plans, we've actually worked on them, but as we get into our capital improvements budget, we have pushed it off into the back part of our 5-year capital plan. So it's not a project that we're working on today with to be done this year or next year, but it is one that we still have on our books and that we are looking to see move in the next 2 to 3 years, so the back end. And that's going to be subject to what the council decides, and that's a comprehensive reconstruction of Brinkley Road. I think Mr. Kennard accurately described it, and you did too. It's a street that is substandard, and it's substandard and to a degree that it does need attention, particularly right in front of this property. When we studied the development for the multifamily development was, of course, about 90 units net. We saw that there were drainage problems. There were drainage problems in the roadway. There are also alignment problems with the roadway. It had the shoulders. We were looking at, for it, a left turn lane and a right turn lane improvements that were going to be part of the obligation for the multifamily users. So they were going to look at to build them on the front end. Now, back to this. If this property is rezoned, the applicant has indicated, and it's his business. I mean, that's what he does for in his, I guess, his business life, is develop storage. A convenience storage is a low impact use. All the same, he's got an obligation to participate. We will expect that participation to be along with the construction and development. We feel very strongly as a staff that when the very first phase of his storage development were to take place, that he were to be constructing roadway improvements to make that a safer road in front of his property. Also, it will be necessary that he address the drainage. The drainage is very sluggish in that area, as a lot of Rutherford County. I think there's a system across the road that he can get into, but it's that would take it through the Wilkerson Trace development. But it's got to be constructed, and it would be under his dime and his obligation to do it on the front end of his project. Does that help to answer your question? We're not going to wait for him to get the whole project developed out before we expect roadway improvements. We're going to expect it on the front end with this project right here because of the degree of need on the roadway and the existing inadequacy. One thing that I want to point out, under the idea of the convenience storage, which is what he's indicated to me from the very beginning, there would be a whole lot less traffic than under a multifamily. The multifamily would be looking at quite a bit more traffic because where people live, people drive daily. They come and go to work and their daily affairs. With storage, they don't often have as much reason to come and go. There will be some traffic that's inherent with any commercial development, but the number of trips per day would be dramatically less, would be my expectation, judging from other similar type developments.
So we would, once we looked at a site plan, we would base the or the city engineers would base recommendations of what would happen to that road and the drainage. Not necessarily, it would be based upon the fact that it is a mini warehouse versus the fact that what could be there since it is commercial fringe.
The recommendations on the roadway are going to have to do with safety and the substandard condition that the roadway's in. I don't think we're going to be worried too much about whether it's convenience storage or multifamily. We've got a roadway that needs attention,
okay.
And this property just happens to front on a particularly sensitive part. There's a curvature. You can see it in the illustration. You can see the curve of the road, but for some reason when I drive it, it looks like it's more dramatic than that. It just feels it. And we really looked it over real hard when we were looking at the multifamily. So I have a very clear recollection that there was a real need that would be addressed before there's any type of non-single family development on that property.
How many years ago was it we looked at this? I can't remember. It seemed like there was some ponds on this property and some
It was in
issues.
2006 that we looked at that, Mr. Lamb.
I have some sympathies for what Mr. Kennard is saying because I know at the time when we were looking at the planned development that was going in there, we were taking into account the impact on the neighbors that it would have on those nice homes on Clover Hill Drive and the nice big yards that they have. And so we were trying to mitigate any impact as much as possible. So I certainly understand his concern about zoning it commercial fringe without really knowing what it's going to end up being used as.
And Mr. Adlott, so the road improvements that would be required would be directly within the bounds of this property and on that side of the road. That would be the improvements that would be required.
Well, that would be there's some issues about alignment of that road. And when you change alignment, sometimes you have to shift things a little bit. I'm going to look at the engineers that he has to make a final determination on, and our city engineer, as to exactly what the scope of work would be. Sometimes turn lanes have to go beyond the property. For instance, a right turn lane into it, or some roadway improvements, because the length and the location of the entrance. It may be it has to go beyond it. It may be that he is unable to acquire right-of-way beyond it. That may not be our expectation. But to do something within the existing right-of-way would probably be our expectations.
And I apologize, I forgot. What is the buffer requirement between a CF and an RS-15, RS-12?
I believe it's a Type D buffer.
Type D. And would you think it'd be the same thing all the way around, or would it, if there's RS-12 on the back and RS-15 on both sides?
RS-15 and RS-12 have the same buffer requirement.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, what are the wishes of this commission?
No matter what happens, he's going to pay for the road. Is that correct?
He's going to pay on the road. Now, he ain't going to probably pay for everything, but he's going to pay for his impact. And that can be something we're going to look real hard to assure you.
And he has a full understanding of that.
Well, they always say they do when they're in my office, when they're wanting to do it. But after they get their site plan drawn, they begin to see the dollar signs. But at this point, he seems to, Mr. Coleman is president, he's nodding his head yes.
Now, under the PRD, it's already been approved for some apartments, is that correct?
Yes, sir. In fact, quite a number of them. I believe 96 units.
And obviously, the storage units are much less intensive use, create less traffic, less noise, less light than an apartment complex.
Certainly less activity, and it would also require approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit.
So he's got to go to Mr. Halliburton's board to get this taken care of anyway.
That would be correct.
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry, Mr. Copeland. No. Okay. There's no guarantee that if we change this, there's no ironclad guarantee that he will do this, though, other than what he tells us. It's not like a PRD where we can make him do what he tells us he can do.
That is correct. In fact, the storage may be only part of what he ends up doing, because there's quite a number of acres there. And he may decide that his business plan requires something more than just storage. But that is his avowed intentions. But the zoning does allow for other things in the commercial fringe district.
But he's a long-established businessman in this county and specializes in storage, building, construction. Is that not correct also?
He owns other storage developments in this county.
Okay. I guess if I lived where Mr. Kennard lived, I'd rather have a storage unit than I would apartments. So I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to item E, PRD amendment for approximately 50.78 acres in the Blackman Farms East planned development along Almar Knott Drive. Murfreesboro Land Company is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir. Our next public hearing is to consider amending the PRD zone for property that's located north of the Hillwood planned development. The Hillwood development is partially developed now. There's a multifamily apartment complex to the south adjacent to Highway 96. This property, of course, is located north of Highway 96, but has no frontage onto Highway 96. It does, however, have frontage onto Almernock Drive, which terminates into, well, at this time terminates into a roundabout, and that's the shape in the middle of the property. The area shaded orange is the area which is requesting the zoning amendment. This property was originally zoned PUD, and I believe that was in 2007 under the name of Hillwood. In 2010, you may remember, there was an application to change the zone from PUD to PRD, so Plan Unit District, Plan Residential District, and this portion of the Hillwood PUD was removed and then became known as the Blackman Farms East PRD, and the plan was to develop this the area shaded orange very similarly to the adjacent Blackman Farms development to the west. It was basically the same development plan with adjustments to change the housing types to be similar to those Blackman Farm houses. The new owner now desires to make a change again to reflect their development plans, so the owner is different from the previous two, which we talked about. The plan proposed in the program book that's before you increases the number of units by 10, but changes the drainage plan to something that appears to be more efficient and have a more effective design. The applicants, of course, have provided that program book to you, and it should be on your desk before you and in the PDFs that you received. The applicant is moving forward with first phase of the subdivision, and that would extend Almernock Drive on the opposite side of the roundabout. The Planning Commission did review a preliminary plat for those lots. Whether the zoning is changed or not with this plan development amendment, that first phase or first section can be developed because it's the same development plan in both scenarios. So they've decided to go ahead and move forward with that first section of the subdivision. Mr. Matt Taylor is representing the applicants, and he's here this evening. He'd like to go through the details of this plan, and after he does go through his presentation, he should conduct a public hearing to consider amending this PRD zone. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them for you.
Mr. Taylor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman Lamb, members of the Planning Commission. Give me just a brief moment to find the right one, and we'll get started. All right, there we go. As Ms. Ely said, this was originally part of the Hillwood PUD, but was removed and placed into what they intended to be the Blackman Farms, and called it Blackman Farms East. To date, the original Hillwood PUD has seen the apartments built, a car wash built, and then you recently reviewed a preliminary plat for what was renamed to Hampton Park, which was a single-family development, actually with lots that are very similar in size and homes of similar construction to what we're proposing with our plan here. Here's some of the infrastructure. This is actually Almernock Drive, coming off of Gresham Park, which will be one of our primary entrances into our portion of the property. There's some of the apartments, as well as the car wash. Our primary plan request change is that we desire to move the detention pond and large open space from more of the central part of the property toward the west, toward Blackman Farms. That's where the water naturally goes, and it works better from a grading and a stormwater standpoint for it to be located on that side. And with that change, we have gained 10 lots. They are the same size as the original plan, 51 feet wide, and we don't want to change that at all. We are keeping all the same connection points to our neighboring properties. Street layout changed slightly to accommodate the detention pond revision, but no large changes in lot sizes and a slight bump in density. The homes themselves are very similar to what you see in the area, especially Blackman Farms. Not much change there. We're talking a mixture of vinyl, brick, maybe some stone. We want a consistent offering of our homes throughout. I think the original, the Blackman Farms East PRD had a few variations listed around the boundaries and across certain streets. We want to be able to build the same home throughout. Our open space, as I mentioned, it'll have a dual purpose. It'll be for some passive recreation, no active sports there, if those homeowners choose to use it for that. And then it also serves as our primary stormwater detention pond area. Our HOA will be completely independent of Blackman Farms. We will not be a member of that. I know the last PRD, that was the desire. We'll be completely independent of their HOA, and we'll be managed by an independent third-party association company. Other than that, those are our primary changes. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have before or after.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, the Planning Commission. My name is John Hardwick. I live at 451 Sharondale Drive. If the map was up, we're the existing houses closest to the proposed development. My concern is minor at this point. I'm glad to see what they were going to do with drainage, because Glendale subdivision all drains to the proposed property. So I'm concerned as to what they're going to do, and including the existing drainage to their new drainage. And I'm seeing that they're going to build a road behind my property. And when I say behind mine, I'll be row houses and then mine. And so I have a big concern about drainage off of my property, given that I'm the lowest lot in Glendale subdivision, and I flood even with a simple rain, let alone a heavy one like we get in the spring. Additionally, I'm concerned about 229 homes. If we take a conservative approach and say that every home has one car, we've got 229 cars, we're going to be a little more realistic and assume that we're closer to 2 cars per home, which is going to give us 458. And they're all going to empty out onto Gresham Lane, one way or another. It doesn't matter if they go up to Braxton Bragg and out to Gresham Lane, if they come out the proposal of Miranda out to Gresham Lane, if they come out Almar Knott to Gresham Lane, which is not designed to have major traffic. I don't know where it fits in future planning, but somewhere down the road it's going to have to be addressed. So they all exit out to Gresham Lane and then down to 96 or to John Rice. That's an awful lot of vehicles to come out early in the morning during the week. For those that get impatient and think they're going to short circuit it, are going to come down Gresham Lane. For those of the board members that don't know, Miranda's up high, Almar Knott is low. The entire land drains, as does Sharondale Drive. Some cars now, without this approval, use Sharondale Drive as a speedway. They come off of Miranda and fly down to get to Franklin Road Baptist Church. So I would urge the members of the board to consider these as concerns. I have one last note before I take my seat. I appreciate that the sign was put on Almar Knott in weeds this high, so that had we not received a letter, none of the houses impacted by this proposed development would have known of this hearing this evening. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hardwick. Anybody else? Anybody?
I'm Marcy Hardwick. I also live at 451 Sharondale Drive. I've been in construction a lot of my life, and I know and I see how the water drains. My concern is there going to be fill dirt in any of that development where they're going to be raising the lots up? Because if they do, they're creating me a pond, and I'll be able to sell you crawfish and shrimp, okay, because the water is going to stand there. That's just one other thing that I'd like to see looked at before anything goes further. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hardwick. Anybody else?
Yeah, Jack Gowan. I live on the last house, Miranda Drive, 2424. And my thing is going to be the traffic coming through It's going to be so hard for me to back out on the Miranda because there'll be so much traffic. And with that roadway, they're going to have to put a buffer there, and it'll be hard for us to see traffic coming in and out from that area. And what kind of buffer are they going to put between my house and the new area being built?
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody? Okay, seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Adlock, can you maybe address the drainage questions to some extent as far as the field dirt question that Ms. Hardwick had and also the buffer question the last gentleman had?
Let me answer those, but let me ask Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor, have you done an initial look at the drainage for the area backing up to Sharondale?
We have. We've actually, with the first phase, we looked at a master drainage plan. That's part of the reason why we came back to want to move the detention pond. We're looking at running pipes from all the way from our detention pond back to basically the back of our lots that back up to Sharondale there, that would pick up all that water. We wouldn't be creating any dams. We actually give it I would say, a better way out. It looks to me like it's very slow draining through there at times. And so once it exits their property, it'd get into a good drainage system on our side, make its way to our detention pond.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. What I wanted to demonstrate was that they're already aware of the drainage conditions and that they're already beginning to do a master plan for the property to figure on draining the property behind the Hardwicks. We do not expect that there'll be any fill material brought in that will trap there. Of course, the building pads will be built up to create the proper drainage for the houses and the streets, but there will be a drainage system put in that will allow for the drainage out and will not be trapping water on anybody along Sharondale. That is something that we're going to be looking at. We'll be looking at as part of the plan subdivision plats that we'll be reviewing as a planning commission. With regards to a buffer, I don't think we were looking to see a buffer constructed around the perimeter of this development. It's single-family houses adjacent to single-family houses. We don't usually do that. But if there is an existing tree row, typically the developers and the property owners want to keep those existing tree rows so that they are part of the ambiance and will actually serve to make the place a little bit nicer.
Mr. Lamb?
Yeah.
Ms. Hardwick, if you would, before, we're going to get some rains here shortly, and floods. Take a bunch of pictures and send them to Mr. Adlock. That helps us so much. And it also helps the developer figure out things also. So just take some pictures and send them to Mr. Adlock. That'll help us a lot. Thank you.
A lot of times when you see, I know you folks have had a lot of drainage problems over the years in that whole subdivision there, and that was developed in the county many years ago.
Yeah.
A lot of times what we've seen is sometimes development around you actually helps the situation rather than exacerbates it. So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here. I can't predict that, but if the engineering's done correctly, it may really assist you. So, I'm sorry, Mr. Adlock, I think I cut you off.
I was going to say, Mr. and Ms. Hardwick know me, and they know how to call me. They can get. I'm glad to get my email. If you can email me any photographs.
I've got a cell number if you want it. So.
You have a private cell number. We know where that's all.
Any other questions from members of the Planning Commission? If not, we're ready for a motion.
Chairman Lamb, I make a motion that we approve.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Item F is a PRD amendment for approximately 181 acres in the Puckett Station Plan Development along Puckett Creek Crossing. Puckett Station Partnership is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir.
That's a lot of
Next application is to consider another PRD amendment. So the property that we're considering amending is currently zoned PRD, Penn Residential District, is a part of the Puckett Station Plan Development, which is currently under development. There's some lots that have been built, but there's also a considerable amount of property that hasn't been developed as of yet. However, this is one of the properties, whereas even when we've seen things slow down in Murfreesboro, this is one of the areas where we were still issuing single-family permits. So development's continued here. The plan is coming to you to amend this because the developers have become aware of a change in product that the home buyers seem to really like, so they've made adjustments to the plan. The adjustments or the proposed changes include a reduction of 18 single-family lots and an increase of 30 townhome units for a net change of 12 additional dwelling units in the total development. Change also includes an increase in the acres that are devoted to the townhome units and a change in the townhome design to include a two-car garage offering. Included with the agenda materials is a program book that was prepared by the applicants that describes proposed amendments. I believe also the part of the desire is to increase the depth of the single-family homes because the developer has found that people enjoy their outdoor kitchens in the backyard, which require a little bit deeper of a lot. And I think that there have been some variances that have been approved for some of these lots rather than continuing down a path where variances would be requested. Go ahead and design the plan so that it works. And so that's what the driving factor why it's coming for you. Mr. Matt Taylor, of course, can describe the application much more thoroughly than I can, so we'll invite him to the lectern to go over the details. You should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
He's going to ask, are there any questions?
I don't think his microphone's working.
Good evening again. I do have a brief presentation again, although Ms. Ely did hit most of the high points there, I believe. I'll show you a couple of pictures of some of those specific changes. Development progress to date, we have put in the infrastructure and developed most of the lots with homes in sections 1 through 4 of the single-family portion of the development. Section 5 is currently under development, under construction of the roads and utilities. And then the infrastructure for Puckett Downs Section 1 has previously been constructed, which is highlighted in red on the screen. And many of those buildings themselves have been constructed with a few more left to complete there. Here's some of the homes in the preserve, which is the larger lots in the development. It's on the northern section of Puckett Station. There's an example of some of the knolls, which is on the southern side of the road. And then there's our entranceway, as well as our roundabout. You can see that it really provides for a nice entryway to the community, a nice welcome home to the residents out here. Our request is primarily, like Ms. Green said, was that it's a net increase of 12 units. It's about a decrease of 18 in the single family and a increase of 30 in the townhomes. That's primarily, or actually all that is done in the what I would call the southwest corner of the development. We've exchanged some property there. We did make most of the smaller lots, the knolls, made those deeper by, I believe it was about 7 feet. To allow that outdoor living, adequate space there. That's become very popular in Puckett Station, along with the look of the houses themselves. So we've tried to go back in and revise our plan to accommodate that, as well as these new townhomes that she mentioned. Here, just outlining where we've removed those lots. We've removed some lots in the preserve. That was primarily due to combining lots just to fit a certain size house or detention pond stormwater compliance there. And then we eliminated some of the lots in the knolls, which was, again, to exchange for this townhome increase. But the home sizes, materials are all staying the same as they currently are in the development. The townhomes, we've color-coded these here for you. Kind of the blue or the grayish color are the no garage units. You get the parking spot in front of your home. The orange are the two-car garage units that we're proposing, introducing with this package. And then the red are the single-car garage units. And again, we're increasing about 30 as far as the overall density of those. The minimum square footage are the same. Build materials are the same as you will currently see inside of Puckett Station. Entrance signs, we're not proposing anything new right now. We have several already constructed within the development. Amenities, No new amenities, but we are maintaining the ones we've already committed to. Open space in the northeast corner of the site. Actually, it's already in existence. We've got future open space plan on the western portion of the property. Both of those serve a dual purpose for stormwater. We've got a pool and playground already constructed near a roundabout in the central part of the community. And then we also plan an additional pool and pool house with the next section of the townhomes. Other than that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about the application.
Mr. Taylor, just one thing to clarify.
Yes, sir.
Part of what's driving the amendment is some of the changes in the street pattern and the connection to the property to the southwest. Rather than going as an east-west connection, you come in as a north-south, but it will be designed to have a calming effect on traffic.
Yes, we've made that a very short street stub, so it's not a long straight stretch into the neighboring property or into ours for that matter. We do want, right now it does only have one way in, but we have set that up for a future connection back out to, I believe that's Brinkley to the south of us there. Once that property in our southwest corner does develop, we'll have another way in and out and have maintained that continuity and ability.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'll open the public hearing at this time, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. If there's any questions, if not, we'll entertain a motion.
No question, Chairman. I move for approval. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item G, a PUD amendment for approximately 23.63 acres in Manson Pike Crossing PUD along Fortress Boulevard. D.O. Horton, applicant, is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir. The next public hearing is to consider a PUD amendment for property located south of Puckett Creek Crossing. It's also located along the western side of Fortress Boulevard and is identified on the blue color on the map that you see before you on the screen. This property is near the previous property, which you just considered a plan development amendment. This property was zoned PUD in 2005, in early 2005. And as an element of the plan, it identified this area as multifamily sites J and K in the PUD program book. It received zoning approval to allow the development of 347 multiple family dwelling units at a density of 15 dwelling units per acre. Later in 2005, the Planning Commission approved a site plan for the development of a 281-unit multifamily complex on the property consistent with the approved site plan, and soon afterward, construction began. The internal streets, alleys, utilities, including water and sewers, stormwater, for the entire site. Permits were issued for construction on the first two buildings, including 12 dwelling units. However, construction soon ended, and there has been no construction on the site since that time. Property has been casualty of the recession and is now owned by the applicant who wishes to change the plan. This property probably looks familiar to you because the Planning Commission has reviewed an application for initial design review for the portion of property located along Fortress Boulevard to continue the development for that portion of property as multifamily dwelling units. At that time, it was just discussed to you that there would be a future application to change the remaining portion of the property, the zoning for that, so that it would no longer develop with no longer develop as a multifamily community, but a single-family detached dwellings. So that is the heart of the change that's coming before you tonight. The applicant has prepared a program book that describes the proposed amendments. Of course, you have that available. Of the 23.63 acres, 7.25 acres are proposed to remain unchanged as multiple family dwellings for a total of 70 dwelling units, and that's what you reviewed as the existing two structures, plus the additional units, which you'll consider for final design review probably at the very next meeting. The remainder of this site is 16.5 acres and is proposed to become single-family detached lots for a total of 82 single-family detached lots. These lots would be a minimum of two sizes governed by their lot width, either 60 feet wide with a minimum of 5,400 square feet, or 51 feet wide with a minimum of 4,500 square feet. So these are small lots. This results if you do approve the plan as proposed to you tonight, and a reduction of approximately 221 dwelling units from the original zoning approval. So originally, they could do 347 multiple-family dwelling units, but if this plan, as revised and submitted to you, has 221 less units than originally approved. The applicants, of course, are available. I believe that there will be a presentation on this. I think Mr. Taylor, yeah. And so after he goes through the details of the plan, you should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to City Council.
Evening again. Ms. Ely said, I think that one's on the wrong computer. There we go. Ms. Ely says it was part of the original Manson Pike Crossing PUD, approved back in 2005, with subsequent site plan, construction plans for some townhomes, multifamily on this parcel. That construction was started as part of Site K, shown on the screen here, as well as Site J, which are shown in the red and the dark blue. While construction was ongoing, the previous owner fell on hard times and construction ceased after only 2 buildings on our Site K were completed, and no buildings on Site J were completed. Here's a picture of one of the buildings that has been constructed on site, as well as some of the infrastructure. You can see here the overall master plan of our 2 parcels, the townhomes, which are in the lower left of your plan or screen there. You have seen an initial design review, and then hopefully this next month we'll be back before you for the final design review for those townhomes. The remainder of the site we are proposing to change from the townhomes that were previously approved to the single-family lots themselves for a decrease in density of over 220 dwelling units. The single-family unit portion itself is a mixture of 60-foot wide lots and 51-foot wide lots. Not hardly a 50-50 split, but about 6 more 51-foot wide lots than the 60s. And you can see that we've tried to present most of the larger lots to the external part of the development. We do have some of the smaller lots coming out on the back road there. Just outlining some minimum home sizes, 1,700 square feet minimum house size. We do want to use all good quality materials here. Our materials here will be consistent with what was approved for the townhomes, which was stone and cement board siding. Vinyl will only be in the trim soffit areas. All of our homes will be front-loaded. They'll have garages. The doors themselves will be carriage-style garage doors, all 2-car garage homes. Here you can see this is basically the same footprint with maybe a couple different elevations there. And the same thing here. That's one of the larger homes there. Other than that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about the application.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Nobody? Okay. I'll close the public hearing. Questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Mr. Taylor, is this intersection at Fortress and Puckett Creek Crossing anywhere close to a warning of traffic signals?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
But I'll ask Mr. Bonchandran to look at it.
Anything else? If not, we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion we approve.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Item H is a PRD amendment for approximately 47.3 acres in the Liberty Townhomes PRD along Cherry Lane. Mr. John Harney is at the screen.
Thank you. Our next public hearing is to consider another PRD amendment for property located north of Cherry Lane, and you can see that the property is identified in the purple shade on the map that's before you, identified as the requested area. This property is a total of 47.3 acres, and it is a part of the Liberty Townhomes PRD, which was originally approved in early 2006. The plan included approval for the development of a multifamily development featuring 254 townhome-style condominiums on 47.3 acres for an overall density of 4.7 dwelling units per acre. Soon after the zoning was approved, the Planning Commission reviewed and approved a site plan for Phase 1 of the development, which included 49 dwelling units at the south end of the property, which fronts along Cherry Lane. However, since that time, this project, it's my understanding, became a casualty of the economic recession, and there have been changes in the ownership and market conditions, and the applicants are now motivated to amend the PRD to a different plan. And that would be to allow the balance of the property to be developed with 100 single-family detached dwellings instead of townhome dwellings. This, of course, represents a reduction in the number of units that's permitted of approximately 103 dwelling units from the original approved plan. So the existing units, which are currently developed that are along Cherry Lane, will remain, and then the property that's to the north will be developed single-family residential lots. That would also include the construction and extension of a public right-of-way, so the developer would be required to construct that street according to our subdivision regulations and street standards, and that would become a public right-of-way, which is what we want to see along single-family detached homes. There's a program book that's included in your agenda materials that goes through the details of the specifics of the changes that are being approved. There are some unusual circumstances that dramatically affect the design of this property. Of course, there's water quality issues, and because there is a stream, and you can see it as the blue area on the map. There's also some easements on this property that take up a considerable amount of property, one of which connects the city's water treatment plant to Percy Priest Lake, a sewer force main, and a greenway easement. So I'm going to invite Ms. Cherie to the lectern to go through the details of this plan. After she goes through the details of this plan, you should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to City Council regarding the proposed change to amend the PRD.
Ms. Akers, whenever you're ready. Do you just want the site plan?
That will probably be fine.
I've got it on the screen if you just want to use what I've got up.
Because I think it just clicked off after his.
There you go.
Save the best for last.
Well, I'm last, so.
Oh, sorry.
You're right.
It's her foot. Okay. As Margaret Ann has discussed with you and kind of outlined the facts pretty clearly, the subject property was approved as a PRD back in 2002, and it was approved for 254 townhomes and a gross density of 4.7. And as she indicated, we're looking to convert the remaining property to single-family, 100 single-family lots that are 50 feet wide. There are 31 existing townhomes on the front portion that fronts onto Cherry Lane. That site is known as Lot 1 on the original plan. And we are proposing a reduction from the original 49 that was approved in the first phase. There'll now be 47 units on that Lot 1 instead of 49. And again, there are 31 existing. The reduction of the additional 2 units came out of some concerns with the existing property owners in the townhomes. They needed some additional parking. So we have eliminated 2 units in order to provide, you'll see on the site plan, a little small parking lot area with 6 additional spaces. And that is the reason for the reduction. The overall new density will be 2.72 units per acre, so it's a significant reduction in density and also in the overall number of units. Again, Lot 3 is where the majority of, where all the single-family units will be developed. It's currently vacant. And as Margaret Ann has indicated, there are a number of site constraints, quite a bit of easements, and also the stream, and also the dedication of the proposed greenway that we have allocated on the plan and made adequate space for. And we will work with the city in the design where needed, and we will accommodate that future greenway. Again, access is provided on Cherry Lane. We are proposing to upgrade the existing entrance into the townhomes to a 40-foot right-of-way. We will also maintain a sidewalk on one side, and we will also place a masonry wall to help guard against traffic coming in and those that are right up against that roadway, the existing townhomes. As you go through the enclave, that will also be a 40-foot right-of-way, and it will have sidewalks and street trees on both sides. Again, as I said, there are 150-foot lots. We're proposing setbacks of 25 feet in the front, 5 foot in the side, and 20 feet in the rear. The architecturals essentially are as a traditional classic style. They will all have front facades with either brick, stone, or fiber cement, or some combination. The homes will be served by front-loaded garages. The typical square footages will range between about 1,450 square feet to 2,500 square feet. And there will be a homeowners association established in order to enforce all the restrictions and to manage the property and the common areas. There will be a common area in the center of the property will function as a focal point for the community. It will also be open to the existing townhome owners and the future townhome owners. This will provide a pavilion and a lawn area, community cooking area, and a children's playground. We will not be providing a swimming pool, and there will also be some limited secured access to the greenway within the development. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Akers. I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Roger Zemansky, property owned, butts up against the proposed change. Having lived there for a while, I understand what happens with that creek that was mentioned as being a constraint. Believe me, it is and will be a constraint when you start adding more people in there, more homes, more stuff in that area. Please be very, very careful of the impact on that stream. We have just received a notice in the mail through the city by virtue of the state that nothing can be touched 50 feet from the center line of any of the streams because of EPA regulations. That also should be considered, too, on impact. So I recommend that you be very careful allowing that kind of density up against that stream. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Nobody? Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Adlott, any comments on the environmental impact?
Well, yes, sir. I will note that on the plat for this property, there is already a water quality protection area that's shown, and it's also shown on the concept plan, and they are respecting it. They know going into it that they're going to have to protect that stream. It's got I don't think it has a FEMA-regulated floodway, but there's certainly a floodway, a stream, stormwater conveyance through there. It's wet most of the year, almost all the time, and it's going to be protected, and they're aware of it.
Mr. Ives, the questions about the easement for the Greenway connector, you're comfortable with that being worked out in the future?
I am. We have the prior developer agreed with the city that they would provide an easement for the Greenway. Several years ago, a preliminary master plan was done that gave a basic routing for the Greenway, but it's not a final routing. It's not a surveyed final route. I know Mr. Adlott has discussed this with the applicants, and I believe they are aware that the city will very jealously protect the Greenway corridor to go through there. I do notice that on their site plan, they're proposing that portion of the greenway actually be located off of this site there toward the north end, that it would go over onto another property. I don't know if that property is currently controlled by the applicants or not, but the Park and Rec and city staff will certainly work with the applicant to come up with a final route that works for them, beneficial for them and beneficial for us. But I am, with the recorded document and the recorded commitment, I'm comfortable that we will be able to work with the applicants and make an allowance for something that will be good for all of us.
Okay, I see Mr. Harney nodding, so I think he's willing to work with you on that. Okay. Any other questions? No, we're ready for a motion.
Move for approval. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Final public hearing is a zoning ordinance amendment regarding the definition for family. Planning staff, the applicant. Mr. Aylott or Ms. Green? Who wants it?
She wants to be last.
I think I took that from him. But, yeah.
Save the best for last, as Ms. Aker says.
Our final public hearing this evening is to consider amendment to our zoning ordinance. This amendment is regarding the definition of the word family in our zoning ordinance. Of course, the current zoning ordinance that we have was adopted in 1984, and the definition for family was adopted at that time, and it hasn't been changed since then. However, I believe there have been some changes in both state and federal law to the definition of family. So what we're proposing to do this evening is to match our definition with that of the state and the federal definition. So you have an example of how the word family will be modified. Of course, as proposed, it will include a group of not more than 8 unrelated persons with disabilities as defined by applicable federal law, which includes at least one additional person and may include a total of 3 additional persons acting as support staff or guardians who need not be related to any of the persons with disabilities residing in the home, living together as a common household in a dwelling unit. And we would like to note to you and anybody who may be interested in this that persons who have been convicted of a crime involving violence, who have been convicted of an unlawfully manufacturing or distributing any illegal drug or controlled substance, who are registered or required to be registered as sex offenders, who are currently illegally using a controlled substance, and persons whose tenancy would constitute a direct threat to the health or safety of others, or whose tenancy would result in substantial physical damage to the property of others, shall not be deemed to be persons with disabilities for purposes of this definition solely by virtue of that statute. So there are certain types of people that we were not giving including in that definition, and of course those are those people. We have worked with the city's legal staff, and they are in support of this change in getting our definition lined up with federal regulations. Before we can make any change to the zoning ordinance, you of course need to have a public hearing and formulate a recommendation and forward that to City Council for their consideration. We believe this is a positive thing, and of course if you have any questions, be glad to answer them.
Hearing no questions come forward, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Nobody? I'll close the public hearing. Are there any questions? No, we're ready for a motion.
Make a motion, we approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. That concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda. Staff reports and other business, Mr. Adelot.
3 very short ones. We have had a number of people in our audience tonight with Leadership Rutherford. We're glad to have you. If you hadn't already got your cards signed at the end of the meeting, Mr. Lamb will be glad to take care of those as one of his duties as chairman. Next thing, if you haven't already received it, you should be getting a memo from, I think, Ms. Davis about training for 2014 to meet our Public Chapter 862. Look that over. We ought to give you about 12 opportunities to get 4 hours of training. So out of the 12 meetings, you may need to attend 4 to get the training.
And you might want to check, we had a new disclosure we had to send to the state this year.
Yes.
Make sure everybody did that.
You should have already taken care of that. If you hadn't, you should have heard from somebody by now.
Everybody knows.
The state sent me the letter out.
Okay.
So did Melissa. And then I called them, and they said, well, we hadn't looked at them yet.
I believe Kathy Smith sent you an email as well.
Right. So you should have already.
Is there one for the state and for the city?
Yes.
There he is.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilman Young?
The state can be done online.
Yeah, it can be.
Who do I need to see?
Mr. Adlai, do you have
The
any other
last
business?
thing is, if you haven't already, you should be receiving a copy of the year-end report, which shows that you all have done a lot of work in the year 2013. The statistics and reports are in. You did a lot of plats and plans. You did a lot of heavy lifting. This 2014 is going to be
we
good.
did a fraction of the work the staff did. So thank you for everything you did in 2013 and your staff and the legal department. What a wonderful city government we do have.
Thank you.
All that being said, if there's no other business, we stand adjourned.